Good morning. This is Sweetie Berry with Between Us Girls. I'm with you today as one of the Women of Dare Whimsy, a community for gifted and creative women who come together to share the adventures of living gifted. Today we're going to be talking about when good enough is fine. You see, gifted women create a lot of self-pressure often about doing their very best, and society also produces a lot of pressure on do your best. But for a multi-talent, for someone who has gifted intelligences and high creativity, doing your best can be very limiting. In fact, with only 24 hours in the day, choosing to put enough energy to be excellent in everything you do may be very limiting completely in itself. You see, as we have only a few hours each day to be with our loved ones, our friends, our workforce, our relationships, and our physical bodies, sometimes we need to choose just to be good enough in an area in order to enjoy meaningful time in another one. Good morning. This is Sweetie Berry. I'd love to start with Gail Roddy this morning. Gail is an author, a playwright. She created the play Calling All Mothers to the Well and a curriculum program for girls of all ages, particularly high school and college-age girls, of Calling All Friends to the Well, which is a current play being offered in public schools, after-school programs, as well as community colleges and universities. Good morning, Gail.
Good morning, sweetie. Good morning, everyone.
Good morning. I know that you talk with girls of all ages, and you've seen the trend, I'm sure, of over-pressuring oneself to be excellent or perfect at everything. When is good enough fine?
When or what is good enough?
Either way,
Okay.
what is good enough for you, and what does it mean when I say, or when we say, that sometimes good enough is just fine?
An example that I can give in my own life is I found good enough is just fine when it comes to exercise. You know, so many of us are on the fast track with exercising for health and also to lose weight. But sometimes we can overdo, especially if we just exercise on the weekends or if we push to do 2 hours a couple of days a week as opposed to 15 minutes every day. And that causes injuries. And so I found one of the things that works for me is that's good enough to just do 15 minutes a day. But injuries cause physical pain, and physical pain is a great stopper for me. Emotional pain of doing too much work or running around too much, I don't get as much physical pain with that. It may be emotional pain. But boy, when I'm hurting physically, when my back is hurting, my knees are hurting because I've overdone, that has taught me to back off, and that's good enough to do 10 or 15 minutes every day. I'm trying to move that philosophy into every other area of my overachieving life. So I'm working on it. It's a work in progress.
I think we're all a work in progress, that's for sure. You know, one of the things that you said is so very important. What are the indicators of overdoing, overworking, overproducing? Because that's usually a sure sign that you're doing way too much and not realizing that good enough is fine. You know, one of the expectations for myself is that I be at peace. Well, gosh, if I'm at peace, that means I'm not feeling hurried, I'm not feeling rushed, I'm not feeling tremendous pressure to do something I'm having difficulty fitting into my schedule. Sometimes when I'm not in that space, which often, frankly, is the case lately, I have to stop and say, what is the expectation here? What am I doing to myself that's causing these feelings of discomfort, these emotional feelings of discomfort when I'm looking at my schedule and going, oh, I can't get it all done. Or worse, I'm not even writing it down anymore because if I ever see it, I know I'm overdoing it. You know, so many of us who are in the gifted and talented pile, as well as those who are high organizers, we just kind of start hedging. We stop putting in the details of what we're doing on our calendars because if we wrote it all down, we'd have to be busted for not dealing with good enough. We would be busted and realize, in just looking at the list, how silly we've gotten with our expectations for ourselves. Our expectation should be to have a pleasant day. It should be that most of the time we're at peace with ourselves and one another and other people around us. We should be at peace with our finances. We should be at peace with the way we work and the way we interact with others. And when we're not consistently at peace, Peace being defined as feeling pretty capable, feeling pretty okay, feeling like it's a doable, achievable way of existence. I bet you hard that you will go in and see that you have an expectation of something that's not just good enough anymore, but you're expecting to do everything for everybody or everything to a level that you can't maintain and handle the other things in your life. I see Sarah Cook has just joined us. Sarah is the author of Raising CEO Kids. I know she knows a tremendous amount about having to choose to do things just good enough, because that's fine when she's trying to achieve in a different area. Tell me about that, Sarah. Oh, goodness. Let's get your mic up. There you go.
Perhaps I had to learn it again yesterday because I had so much to do on my Stickies and Spirals notebook that I wrote it all down in Stickies, but I just didn't even dare to put it in my planner because I was so overwhelmed, and I ended up getting myself a migraine. And so, you know, sometimes we have to keep learning things, and we will keep learning those things until the pain of remaining the same is greater than the pain of change. And so it's a hard lesson earned, but I chose then to come home and take a really nice mineral salts bath and put some essential oils and have a really nice dinner, and I took the evening pretty much off because it was important for me to slow down after the pace of starting at 3 a.m. yesterday and going until 5:30 p.m.
Well, that's it entirely. You know, there are many times that our weeks just start changing what's going on. I know at our house this week, my husband is working on a project every evening. And, you know, most of the time we have a dinner together at 5:30 at the table, and most of the time that's probably a main course and 2 or 3 extra things like vegetables and salads. But this week it's been a grab-and-go kind of week. We needed to do quick things because Madison had her own things and Les had his own things, and we needed it to be able to be done easily. So I'm not putting pressure on myself this week to do a meat and 3 or, you know, meat and 3 and a dessert. I'm looking for easy to go things like fajitas or pizza, something that's just good enough to give us good nutrition, good safe food, but at the same time to not put the pressure of everybody being able to get here at one time, everybody being able to sit down at one time. That's very important value for our family. But good enough is fine sometimes, and this is one of those weeks, as many of you have with ball games or children or expectations while traveling. I need to change my expectation from a really sincere way to do meat and 3 and a dessert. It's just good enough is fine on one quick, easy meal course. Bobby, I see you're with us today. I hope that you're feeling better. I know you've been really fighting bronchial pneumonia kind of stuff, and we're glad to see you here today. What have you seen in your children's ministry and your work with other gifted girls on when good enough needs to be fine, or how do you identify that in your own life?
Good morning. Actually, I really learned about it when I started college back in 2008. I was a single mom at the time, and I was working 4 part-time jobs, going to school full-time, running a children's ministry, and I had all these deadlines with homework, and I was like, I can't do this. And I went to talk to one of my professors, and I said, you know, I have to write these perfect papers for school, and you guys keep giving me these deadlines, and I've got 5 classes, and I just don't know how to do this. And he sat me down, and he said, well, Bobby, he said, you know, maybe you just need to write the paper one time, edit it one time, and turn it in. You don't need to stay up all night and continue to write and rewrite because it is good enough with your first time writing. And it was like the little light bulb came on, and I said, oh, so I don't have to turn in the perfect paper because the perfect paper doesn't exist. And that's what I've learned now is that giving myself that much pressure for it to be perfect, I'll never attain it. You cannot be perfect because there's no such thing as perfect. So good enough now means I get things in by the deadline. I don't stress over the deadlines. I give a good effort, or I give my best effort when it calls for that. But it's so important that we realize that we come first and that perfectionism is not attainable.
Oh, I think that's so important. You know, for me personally, turning 50 this year, one of the things I've really taken in as a serious ponderance every single day when I start the day is there's only 24 hours in this day. There's only about 11 hours that I'm planning to be awake and functioning in something that's with other people or with the things that I do for a living. And of that, I've chosen certain hours as work hours, and certain hours as play hours, and certain hours as family hours. So time is the commodity of choice for me this year. And I used to look at the best product I can give, and that could just expand into hours and hours and hours past what I was remunerated for or past what I was willing to commit to. So part of my good enough conversation has been to say, I'm going to write 2 blog posts on Monday mornings between 8 and 8:45, and for me, that's a doable achievement. It might not have been when I first started blogging, but at this point, it really has become where I live. And so it's very important to me to recognize that time is a factor in what good enough is. When we're in business for ourselves, sometimes we have to realize that a client can't afford our best. Our client may need something that's adequate for the level of remuneration they can afford right now. And that's a sticky place sometimes because you want to do your best for everyone. But the truth is, time is a commodity. And so if they have only enough time to pay for, say, one great graphic or one great website page, then that's what we can identify as good enough. And later, when that one has done its job well, they'll be able to afford more. So I've taken the same concept in what I've done in my business. I have 100 things all the time between my 2 businesses that I want to catch up, get ahead of, or do more of. But I really stop and look and say, okay, what is the point? Is the point to show up as a 100-page website, or is the point for the people who land on the front page to know what to do? Is the point to write 5 blog posts a week, or is it to write an effective blog post each week and then spread it on social channels more developed? Really good enough is defining the line out of what you want your life to look like. Personally, I want my life to look like a person who is happy to be with you, a person who can really take time to listen to the person who's in front of them, a person who is enjoying the engagement of their family, and when they're with their clients, and when they're with their church, their minds where they are in their social organization or church, not so overwrought with how to get things done that I can't stay in the moment. And that was a very, very sincere goal for me for 2015. Am I living in the moment I'm at? And expectation has everything to do with that, because sometimes that means that instead of having 30 outfits, I now have 8. I have 8 outfits in my closet, because if I coordinate my clothes, I coordinate the scarves and things, I work with 8 base outfits are enough to do 30 or 40 looks. And keeping up for me with 30 outfits in the closet or 30 or 40 different types of outfits, boy, it was just pleasing to have, but the truth was it was a lot for me to maintain in a small house, in a small closet with a travel schedule. And getting it down to 8 outfits meant that life got a lot easier. Everything matched each other. Everything had a basic concept, and then seasonally I change out those 8 outfits to some other outfits for the right season. But that kind of thing, deciding that good enough is fine, has helped me be more calm, more relaxed, more in myself in the times and the places I want to be fully present. And that's something that's very important to me. I see Martina McGowan, who's a physician, a gynecologist, as well as a minister, is with us. She writes on taking the next step. And Martina is not only a mom and a grandmother and a physician and a minister, but she also is one who very much makes choices daily on when good enough is enough and is fine. Martina, good morning. How do you identify in your own life when you've got to change perspective because good enough is taken over as perfection instead of good enough is fine?
Well, it's a hard thing to choose when good enough is enough, no matter what you're doing, whether it's your professional life or your personal life. I've kind of narrowed it down. I follow some of the same guidelines, although I'll have to get some cues from you about the wardrobe thing. But for me, it comes down to, am I valuing and honoring myself and the gifts that I have, and am I valuing and honoring others to give them the space to demonstrate the gifts that they have? Now, just because I can do something doesn't mean that I need to do it. Perhaps I need to demonstrate it and teach it. Perhaps I don't need to do it at all. Maybe it's not my calling and it's someone else. But part of what I need to do is to rein in some of those things that I've been given to let others shine as well. That's a gifting.
It really is. You're so absolutely right. I just had a conversation with Sarah earlier this week that when we were first brand new entrepreneurs, that we believed that we should learn to do everything about our website and everything about our business and everything about how we follow through with deliveries and such. And as we matured in our businesses, we realized that really when people stick to their best gift and their best giftings and allow for that which they are not strong to be something they can identify but not implement, their businesses grow. You know, Sarah and I both have been through the times where we just did everything and we tried to do everything ourselves and we tried to be self-contained and we called that frugal and we called that smart and we thought we were doing really good things for ourselves. And then later we figured out when we hired the specific help we needed, whether it was help in our homes because we were busy presenting that week and we needed a little more support at the house, or whether it was help in menu planning or doing cooking by the month with a friend so that we were putting things in the freezer with a friend who was really into that, or maybe even hiring our children to be able to cook dinner on a night that we were busy. Not only did the flow follow through better in our life, but our finances follow through better in our life as well, because we were not trying to be everything to everybody. You know, that's another form of perfectionism, and sometimes that's another form of selfishness, as Martina kind of aligned to. When we don't allow people to be who they are in their lives and in our lives, we kind of push people out, and that's a selfish thing because, you know, we all need each other, and we each have gifts for specific taskings. You know, I am really not gifted at home keeping. People who've come over here, they can watch me sweep a floor, and the way they sweep it afterwards, they'll think, wow, that's just not her gift. And at the same time, I have someone who comes to my house every other week, and that is really his gifting. He's so extraordinarily gifted at cleaning houses, and he gets a lot of joy from it. He wakes up in the morning just looking for that mess to clean up, and it's a happy thing for him. And I've gotten over my guilt and shame of hiring someone to do something I'm bad at, because the truth is it is his living, and it's what he can do. He can't go speak to crowds. He can't go do a lot of other things, but he can go down the street and take care of that and go home with a wage earned and feel good about it. And so part of that is getting over yourself, because I didn't see that as selfishness, that I was holding and withholding what I could do from somebody else. But the truth is it is a selfish thing to try and do everything instead of what you do in a way that affirms you and allows you to have time. Again, that time is commodity. No one, no matter what your income level, your education level, your age level, you can't get time back. And so I'm constantly encouraging my people, my family, my clients to say, are you spending your time living a life you want to live, the only life you have? You know, that's just very telling. If you're thinking it's spring and you really want to have a flower bed, then you better have some time in your schedule really quickly to start putting together a container garden or a flower bed, because in most areas of the United States, spring is about here. If your to-do list is so long that you're not going to get to that till August, you're going to miss a lot of summertime blooming. And, you know, our lives are that way too. If you're healthy and able to go, it's the time to get outside and smell the air. Because another day you may not be as healthy, or you may not be as able to go because someone near you isn't healthy. So we can't put off till tomorrow. I always talk about my mom a little bit in this space because she was a worker, and she was a sincere, dedicated worker, and she did a lot of self-denial in her life. She believed in putting things off until a better time. And so she would work for herself or for the church or for her family or for her children or husband with the goal of when she retired, she would do that. Well, unfortunately, she retired, and at age 72, she died of cancer because about the time she retired, unfortunately, her health fell apart, and she never got to take those extended trips she wanted to take, just one or two instead of years and years of traveling. Money had been there the whole time. Time had been there the whole time. Availability had been there the whole time. But her internal rules said that you're not allowed to have those trips and fabulous times with your husband and children until you've retired from teaching school or being a counselor. You know, we create some funny rules in our heads sometimes about what we're allowed and what's good enough. Now, my children used to say, what's good enough about cleaning the room that day? And I would say, if you get your bed made, if everything's off the floor that's not a toy box or a piece of furniture, it's good enough. Well, sometimes that meant I went in and their bed was made and all their toys were now sitting on top of their bed, not put away. But you know what? That was good enough because I could walk through the room and not trip over it and not get in trouble when I came in to kiss them during naps or nighttime. We had some other discussions other days about where the toy should have gone instead of on top of their bed. But again, first steps are first. And sometimes good enough is just doing a quick once-over, with a countertop. Another day, you may need to really spray it down, scrub it down, and really clean deeply. But most of us need to define where good enough is to go on to the activities in life that provide a reward for us living this life and working so hard. Gail, I'd like to talk to you a little bit about what you see with friends of yours and groups that you work with when you're speaking on where good enough shows up as overdone in their space. Where are some indicators that someone individually may need to stop and say, wow, I'm really overdoing it in this area? I know we have, both of us have a couple of mutual friends that we have seen where trying to be good enough in business has taken over every conversation in their life and every area of their life. What's another area that you see in the Twin Cities where an individual or a group of individuals have given you kind of a, wow, I need to be careful because they're not going with good enough. They're going with way too much in one area. What does that look like? Uh-oh, we've got no sound on you. Just a moment.
There we go.
Just not getting, there you go.
For me, what that looks like is when I'm around those people, I can feel their dis-ease. As you were saying earlier, when you're not at peace, frequently the people around you can feel it before you can, because you give off this aura, almost this vibe of dis-ease that you don't see yourself. You may look in the mirror and you look beautiful, you look put together, you've got your calendar all set, you know what you're going to do that day, and then you stop and you have lunch with this person, and she's sitting across from me, and I'm thinking, now she's telling me about all these wonderful things that she's accomplished today, all that she's gotten done, but I'm feeling her hair flying off her head. And so for me, that's what I'm seeing here at home when I interact with people and with groups. I can kind of tell, and I don't think you need to, it isn't necessarily about being psychic, it's just that sense that something is not right with this person, no matter how they may look or what they may have achieved that day. It's just not right. So does that kind of answer your question? Is that's what I sense?
Absolutely. I think for me, and I think for most of the gifted girls I work with, there's one of three kind of prototypes that show up. There's the prototype that says, man, I've got a list and I'm going to get it done, and the list takes over their life. It's almost a type A personality. And the list is good. There's nothing wrong with having a list. There's certainly a lot of developmental ways you can use a list to make your life identify what you're doing and not doing. It helps kind of track things like for an ADD person like me. But likewise, when I talk to people in my client base as a strategist, I always ask the question repeatedly, what is the point? And they'll say, to get things done. Okay, what is the point of getting things done? Well, to feel accomplished. Okay, to feel accomplished, what is the point? What is accomplished for you? It's getting paid for my time, and it's feeling like I have made enough income to be safe. Wow. That's a very different thing than what's on your list. Is what's on your list accomplishing that? And that's very telling for a lot of people, because they have put a lot of busy things in their list, which were good things to have done, good things to get done, things like putting out the trash or taking care of a child's pickup at school is very important to do if your child's waiting on you for a ride. But likewise, when you look at that list compared to the goals of their big picture, their meaningful life, the way they want to spend time with their family and friends, the way they want to earn income, the way they want to learn, the way they want to play, almost every time about 60% of that list can start going away. It's one of the hardest things I do as a strategist is to go down to that level of detail with folks, because it feels so invasive to them that, oh, you're saying what I'm doing is not important. No, what you're doing is very important, but towards the line of a meaningful life, it may not be the best thing for you to do, because sometimes we're enabling people around us with our home care I know at my house, if I do it all, they'll let me do it all. They're very welcome for me to do it all or for me to hire it all done. In fact, if I hire somebody to come in and do the heavy-duty cleaning, guess what? Some of the light-duty cleaning stops happening by the individuals responsible for it because they think, well, so-and-so's cleaning the house. I just don't have to do my part anymore. You know, that's not for a place for me to pick up the ball and start doing it again. That's a place for me to put the pedal on a child who's saying, ooh, somebody else is hired to do that. And I'm like, no, your responsibility is still to put your dirty clothes in the hamper. Your responsibility still is for you to put away your clean clothes. We have to really do some line out of boundaries sometimes on where good enough is. Now, I'm all about the non-perfectioning parent. I really don't believe in perfection as a parent and making a child do it every single time. Kids learn and they have, you know, athletic seasons and things that change, and we all have to kind of give and take with those periods of life, just like exam weeks are lighter at my house. Getting ready to go into college exams in the next 2 weeks, I guarantee it's lighter at my house as people are studying up and trying to get ready and get de-stressed about college. But likewise, there's some daily values, and that's one of the things that we're good enough is fine is important to me because I'm starting to line out where those good enough values are daily. You know, am I getting out to play every day? The answer was no for about 2 weeks. And so I'm making sure that that good enough is fine value is now put in some editing modes. I'm not needing to edit another hour. I need to get outside in the sunshine. It's beautiful weather this week in Alabama. You know, I don't need to spend another 30 minutes receiving a phone call. If my phone call hours were over at 10, then I need to turn off my phone and walk outside, or leave my phone and let it ring and walk outside. You know, I find that if you're going to be off phone range, it's just real easy in your machine to give a new message saying, this is 10 o'clock on Wednesday morning and I'm going to be unavailable for the next 2 hours. If you'll leave a message, I'll call you after 4. That also happens for girls' day out, time with your family, other things. There's not many emergencies that you do as a business that are truly emergencies. Very few times are people not going to have oxygen if you don't answer the phone. And it turns out that unless you sell oxygen for a living, you're not going to be responsible for the death if you don't pick up the phone. You know, some of us think that phone is another part of our ear, and we take it everywhere we go, including to bed with us at night. And guess what? Good enough is enough where returning phone calls is concerned. You can say, I return phone calls 1 day a week, 1 time a day, once or twice a week, and you start identifying that, that's enough. I know I've been very well trained with 2 of the businesses I work with to say they receive Thursday morning phone calls between 8 and 9. Guess what? I can make that happen. And I don't think any less of them for not answering the phone Monday through Wednesday and Friday all day long, because I know that they are specific to what they're trying to do for my business, and that means they're working their business the other times. I also don't want people to stop having their family and fun time to do something that they can do at a specific given time. You know, I write a certain day of the week every week, and I write a lot of hours that day. On Mondays, you can almost always find me writing all day long because I do professional writing. You know, none of my close friends call me on Mondays except before 7 and after 4 o'clock for friendship calls because I've communicated to them, hey, Monday's my writing day. It's not a good day for me to visit with you or to Facebook message with you or any of that. So sometimes defining good enough is really important productivity for you too, because it's very important to define what good enough is on being available. Sometimes we only think about good enough about our effort. Our effort's good enough. But you know what? It's also a perspective of availability, of time management, of module management in your life. Maybe you're going to do aerobics 5 days a week sometimes. But maybe other times you're only going to do it twice a week because that's good enough for this season because you're doing other things or your time doesn't allow it. Perspective of good enough is really not about self-valuing your ability to do something. But it may be that too. It may be that you need the ability to say, you know what, my excellence at this would mean I practice this piano piece for 5 hours to play it on Sunday morning. But if I run through it 2 or 3 times, it's good enough to follow through the music, to not have any clunkers while I'm playing, and for the audience to enjoy it while they sing to it. Sometimes it's not about our ability. Sometimes it's about time management. I would love to pop this back to Sarah for a moment, because I know that she works with a lot of women in direct sales instruction and her organizational instruction. I'd love to hear how Good Enough has affected team members of yours when they were beginning as a new direct sales specialist. What are some of the things that we fool ourselves into on Good Enough, on the self-pressure, so we can learn to identify them and not create that own pressure in our lives?
Well, sometimes they feel like that they have to make so many calls before it's good enough, or before they hit a certain number of sales. And I found that many people think, well, if I didn't do that number, then I'm a failure, even though they may have already hit their sales goal, or they may have already hit a scheduling appointment goal. And so sometimes we have to look at what was the desired outcome, and did I hit that outcome? Or maybe it's going out and meeting new people, finding new prospective clients. And if they did what they had wanted to do without doing that certain number, then they have to be willing to say that's good enough. And some of the people, maybe didn't have great results, but they wanted to set a time limit. And then they would feel guilty if they didn't hit the results, even though they had been great about doing that specific time limit. So I think it's important for all of us, especially in direct sales, because we're so, everything's on us. There's not anybody to blame if we didn't get the job done. We have that responsibility, but we have to be willing to look at the boundaries that we can create for ourselves so that we can honor ourselves, honor our families, honor the people that we're helping to support, and not feel guilt, because guilt and shame will inevitably lead us to a spiral downward that doesn't help us to achieve our goals. And it doesn't do anything productive for us. But if we live within those boundaries and work to achieve them, and work to set small goals, like little bites to eat that elephant, and praise ourselves along the way, that's really important. So I've taught the gals that I work with to say yes and to cheer for even the smallest accomplishment, because so many people don't take time to do that. And it's important for our brain to have the wiring of success, and that takes small actionable wins. And then they can feel good about those small wins that will lead to the bigger wins. And all of those help to overcome perfectionism, because when you're trying to do something perfect, you think, until I get to that end zone, I won't be able to celebrate myself. But when you teach yourself, when I teach the people in direct sales, as well as my own self and my children, to celebrate all the wins along the way, your brain develops this deep groove of success. And yes, I do achieve goals, and yes, I do make things happen, and it makes it more likely for us to get to that big win.
Oh, I so believe in that. As a teacher for many, many years, and now as a strategist who teaches a great deal, I really believe in the process and celebrating the process. I love templates. I define a template as a recipe for success. And I think everybody, every quarter, if not every month, should do a template for success in their daily life. And that starts with 3 big goals, 3 little goals, and 3 in-process goals for me. And that template looks like, this quarter I want to, and one of mine is grow a garden. I want to grow a garden with some vegetables in it so that by the middle of the summer I'll have some to harvest. Another one of my goals this time is to really add flow to my afternoons, because I have been working too late in the afternoons lately. And so I've gone through to really look at how to leave this office by 1 o'clock, 1:30 at the latest, and have the afternoon with my family or outside with our friends and outside in our yard, because it's absolutely the perfect season spent outside in Alabama. The third big thing on mine is I really want to spend time with people that matter to me in social as well as non-social settings. So for those 3, for the big picture, I'm going back to look at the template of my daily life schedule, because if I'm allowing customer calls to run all over the place for 42 hours a week, or by the way, could you help me with calls to run all over the place, I'm really not going to achieve that goal. I looked at, and Sarah knows this truth, it was funny to me, but it was really telling. I looked at last month how many calls I took from the phone or Google Hangouts, how many of those were help me calls, and how many of those calls I charged a service amount for the time I did professionally in their space, and it was 80% of my calls. 80% of my calls were service calls needing me to do something for them, and 80% of them were not paid for. You know, I am a giving person. I love to give, but I'm learning that I really cannot trust myself to say, yes, I'll help you with that, and charge appropriately for that. So now I've gotten much better this month at saying, be happy to do that. I'm available Thursday from 8 to 9 o'clock to teach that lesson to the classes I'm teaching right now. And those who want the help can come during that time, or they can, like one of my clients did yesterday, say, hey, I really want that on my time schedule, and so I'm willing to pay for that privilege. And those of us who are in business, it's a fine line sometimes to walk to know when we can provide customer service for free and when it's really past that free, quick 2-minute answer. You know, some of mine, of those 80% of the calls, that really turned into almost 68 hours last month for me. And of those 68 hours, many of those were 3- and 5-minute experiences. So in my head, I'm thinking, well, I really don't want to send out a fee for a 5-minute phone call. Can't afford to do that anymore, because at 68 hours a month, that literally costs me about $5,000 income, even at a low rate of pay for that customer call. And so in that space, I have some options. I can either choose to, one, hire someone because there's a need there and see if people need more customer service hours for questions that are not appropriate to ask the strategist, or two, I can provide a set number of times that they can call, like we have now on Thursday mornings from 8 to 9, and if it doesn't fit their need, they can buy additional module hours for one-on-one help from me or one of my staff members. And you know, that's just good business, but it's also good stewardship of my time, because it's not good stewardship of my time to run myself ragged for an additional 68 hours I'm not paid for and trying to make the rest of my life work. That's not the meaningful life I wanted to do. And the ego feed of being able to do something for free, which is often what it is for folks. They love to do it for free, that they're selfish or not selfish, or they're selfless, and they really just want to help somebody out. Or there are people who really enjoy the interaction with other people. That's one of mine. I really love working with my clients, period. I enjoy every single time I'm with them on the phone. I enjoy being with them on their projects. And when they're excited about making a change, I want to be there and excited with them. But you know, that is the business I'm in. So I have to deal with the reality of that time translates as my income. And if it's not translated as my income, I'm now donating my life. And I don't donate my life away. It's just not part of what we can do and be healthy. So in that process, good enough has to be fine. In this case, I can give 10% of my time, which is Thursday mornings, to that free activity I love to do. And after that, there has to be some other boundaries in place to protect myself, my life, and the meaningful life I want to live. Gail, I know in your world that you have kind of a split personality time too between your speaking and your Gail's Kale Chips. How do you manage where good enough is on the time you spend on both as well as your personal life? How do you define that for yourself?
Well, I have to be honest, I'm still working on it. I'm still struggling on giving and not having expectations. I thought about what Sarah said about how I don't praise myself enough for what I do. But especially with this program here, with Dare Whimsy, I am learning that other women, other gifted women, have those same issues. And by talking about it together and working it out together, hearing what they say, hearing myself say what I do and what would improve my life if I did more of, boy, that has really helped me. I just got to say that it was just being able to define it and to continue the brain change of, yes, I can praise myself for something that was easy for me to do or something that I got through with difficulty but got through it. I can get praise for that, because we gifted girls have a tendency to think, oh, shoot, that was so easy. Why should I praise myself for that? You only get praise for when you turn 15 cartwheels. You don't get praise for when you turn 12 of them. And so I'm working on that, I have to say. It's difficult, and as I'm working, I'm able to teach other gifted girls about what the process of what you go through. And that's been really fun and rewarding to be able to take my challenges and to help others to maybe not go through them or go through them a little bit easier. We're all working on this together.
That's absolutely it. You know, when I go to professional meetings about strategy, and when I work with process engineers in companies and corporations and marketing, as well as in processes of building things, the most valued thing in that process is how to simplify. The most profitable thing in a business is how to simplify. The most marketable thing in your life is how to simplify. And so I think we all need to take a lesson there that simple is much more valuable than we give it credit. And when our self-language is, if it's simple, it's not enough. If it's easy, it's not enough. We may be missing a very important lesson in what life is, because our life is not designed to be complex. In fact, our body is a great example. You know, we do a tremendous amount of work as a body. We breathe. We change our body temperatures through our pores and perspiration. We think, we run our heart, we run our lungs, we run our feet. We reach for things without even thinking about it. Those systems are in place that we don't have to put a lot of structured thinking into. Oh, I need to take a breath. Oh, I need to take a breath. Oh, I need to take a breath. And our systems for living may need to take on the same concept. Some of us, because we're gifted and creative, often create complexity because we're bored. And instead of recognizing the concept of boredom and saying, what would I do that would be enjoyable, we do more of the same. Now, in the classroom, we recognize that if you're given 6 or 10 math problems and you scored perfect on those, and the teacher gives you 80 more of them to do, that's not very pleasant. But as adults, many of us do the exact same thing. Instead of saying, wow, I picked up the kitchen, I loaded the dishwasher, now I can go play, we say, oh, now I can scrub the floor, do the baseboards. And sometimes that's appropriate, you know, once a quarter, once a month. But instead of going to the deeper, harder, more complex thing, why don't we stop and say, wow, it was great. The kitchen looks good. I can go out for a walk now. I can go on the phone with a friend now. I can have a cup of Java with someone I enjoy now. Because we often self-discipline ourselves to a negative next action. I just dare you this week to take some time to look at your next actions. And if you're a list minder, like Sarah and I are, how many things on that list are self-supportive? You know, I made a double line in my list this week, and the list on the left has the things I need to do professionally, and things on the right are the rewarding things I need to do continually to tell myself I'm worth the work I do. You know, if I personally am working 30 hours a week, and there's no benefit to my life for doing it, I'm not allowed to do the things I do, or I don't take, you know, a personal allowance to go enjoy the life that I created, then what would be the point? I mean, really? Think about your employee. Okay, you've done everything on the list that your job requires you to do, so I'm going to give you 30% more of what your job requires to do because you did it right. Wow, that makes no sense at all. In fact, if I had an employee who did all the tasks I expected them to do and did them well and adequate, I'd probably say take the rest of the day off, because that's the reward I would most want them to have, to recognize that I value the fact that they put the time in. You know, it's not always possible to take off. I can't always just leave the office or leave a workshop that I'm giving if we finished it early and well, but I can take them to something that's more fun. I can take them to an advanced way to use it, or a different way that they might consider it. It could be that if I'm at the house and I can't leave the house because there's a small child sleeping or something, that I can change the gear to reading a magazine, or I can change the gear to doing something I want to do, paint my fingernails, whatever, to reward myself for getting the jobs done in a good enough way that were well done. I see Ashley has joined us from Hemet, California. Ashley's an artist. I know that as an artist, we always have a need to just perfect a little more what we're doing, and we're thinking, you know, wow, if I could just spend a little more time on this, it would be great. How do you find the good enough mode to know when to finish something, to know when to not keep it going forever and ever and ever?
That's such a good question, and it's something that changes on a case-by-case situation. The most important factor is pick your battles. You know, which situation do you just have to let go and move on? And knowing the hierarchy of your values and how to pick your battles is key there. And sweetie, you're so good at sharing that and really invoking that in me as an artist, because you know I love to research. I love to complete something to perfection. So I think knowing how to pick my battles is key there.
Oh, I think that's such good advice. You know, one of the things I want to talk about, we're almost out of time. We're at the last 10 minutes. Um, really be careful who you're listening to, because people just love to talk. And sometimes people love to talk without understanding that what they say you're hearing. You know, I love to be around a lot of other women and a lot of other cohorts, but not every cohort has your best interest in mind. And they may be saying things that have more to do with their own needs than looking out for yours. Sometimes people are just not kind at all. And it turns out that a few of them will just say things to lace you up to make you feel insignificant. Others, by no intention at all, will ask you things about, like, why do you do that, or couldn't you do this, or what if you added that? And they don't have your outcome in mind. Maybe you've determined that you needed to do 3 minutes or 30 minutes maybe on your social media twice a week to up your intake of how many people see your post. And that's your outcome. Your outcome was to spend a designated amount of time to see if you could find out if that would help get your message spread more effectively. You know, that was your goal. You set the goal and you met the goal. But the person may say, well, what if you spent 4 hours a day on it? Well, what if that? If that was your goal, then that might be something to deal with. But that person may be picking that number 4 hours out of the air arbitrarily. Or they may have a person dedicated to do their social media, and so they're hiring 4 hours of block. And they're not understanding that you're doing that as a single mom or as a married mom or as a entrepreneurial mom with 2 other businesses going on. You have to be very careful who you listen to and who your accountability buddies are, because they may not be on an even playing field with you, or they may not even be structured into the same goals. I know for me, I have a buddy that I just love to death, and I had to just release her from conversations about my business, because her goal is to have large arena audiences all the time. That's what she wants to do. She wants to do 56 arena audiences a year. And that requires travel and being away from her family a good deal. And it also depends upon a drip system with many, many, many people that never interface with her one-to-one or one-to-some. They interface only with her recorded products. And there's nothing wrong with that. That's a fantastic way to live if that's your goal. It's not my goal. My goal is to work with groups of 20 or less, sometimes larger because they're dealing with automated processes or videos. But in general, when I'm teaching a group, I want a group of 5 to 9, because my groups really interact with each other. They get to know each other. They really spend time learning from each other, because I put them in groups of somewhat the same consistency of experience. And so for me, to talk about how many auditoriums have you rented this year, how many auditoriums are you speaking in this year, is not my goal, because I want to work from home and I want to travel less than 4 days a month. And I want to do that effectively with people I truly interact with and have long-term relationships with. And so when I kept hearing this pressure to do much bigger arenas, you know what? I spent about a year trying it out and realizing that, gosh, that not only doesn't meet my business model, it doesn't meet my heart meaningfulness model. It's not who I wish to be, because I see great value in books. I see great value in auto-traded things and mobile sites and all the things that I actually have in place. But for me personally, my most enjoyable moment is when I'm talking with under 300 people and I'm getting to watch their lives grow. And there's just a limited amount of time. If I know a lot more than that one-on-one, I won't know myself by the end of the day. It's just too much input, too many people, too much stuff to keep up with, except at a very artificial, superficial level. And so my teaching, I've learned to do that with. I can do automation on teaching because people need to be able to rewind and replay teaching that I do over and over and over again. And I really enjoy that happening at thousands of people level because I get to see their comments on Facebook and I get to see their comments on Twitter and I get to enjoy their emails to me about their living and their lives as they learn this material. However, I've also learned that when I'm teaching classes that require significant input from a personal perspective, man, I really like those immersion groups to be under 20 people because 20 people in a room is a lot of energy, a lot of emotion, and a lot of experience in one place. And that's where I want that perception to be among those 20 people. I don't want them to have to go through 300 comparisons and 300 competitions and 300 people that feel like maybe they're at risk if they don't do something well because the artificialness is a lot. You know, people just really put out all kinds of stuff if they get past their comfort zone. And so I love to keep people in their comfort zone. I know in our Dare Whimsy group, just this group, we love it to be at about 5, just like it is today, 5 of us sharing, even though we all love each other and the 21 of us, 13 that are very active in this conversation. 5 is just a lot easier to pop the conversation back and forth. We don't feel as ruffled feathers as we're trying to get on and off the mute buttons and off and on who speaks next. It's very important to us to honor that time with one another, and we've discussed as a group that we're probably going to only have 4 or 5 people each week, maybe only 4 with a guest the weeks that we have a guest, because it becomes overwhelming. And sometimes good enough is fine, and being able to reroute our schedule so that we're not available each and every week helps some of us to keep our other components of our schedule back in place, just like Dr. Edith's not here today. She had honored her brother with a promise that she would be there to assist him for something. So we honored her by saying, absolutely, not being here is not a requirement. It's certainly not an expectation that everyone drop their life at 10 o'clock on Wednesday mornings. And in order to be effective, we all need to know that. We need to say it's good enough to be here when you can. In fact, we can talk about it being here once a quarter, and that's enough for some of our players because they're over involved with other parts of their life this quarter, and they can only be here comfortably one time. Sarah, I would love for you to spend our last 2 or 3 minutes sharing with us and popcorning us around on a question. But the question I have for you is, what's the one hint that you have about what area of your life have you needed to say good enough on so that you could move on to excellence in living?
Well, personally, I have found that it regards my house, and I think that that's just because I grew up in a home where the value was that mom was to stay home and be there full time and not work outside the home, and she did that very, very well. And yet I have chosen to work inside my home as well as a bit outside my home and raise a family of 3 children. And so I feel like I've taken on some guilt with that. And last night I had a conversation that just had to do exactly with this, which was I had felt a lot of guilt. In fact, I made a list. I don't know if you can see this. It says, I'm choosing to let go. And I made this list yesterday because I was feeling a lot of guilt and shame. And the number one thing was that I didn't have dinner ready at 5 o'clock. And I felt so much guilt about that because I should have been able to handle that, even though I was not even in the house till 5:30. And I said something to my daughter about that, and she's like, why would you feel guilty about that? I liked to do it. So I would just prefer you do it, let me do it. And that was a real epiphany for me because I realized at that moment that I was taking on something that not only was I beating myself up about it, but I would have been taking joy from my daughter who prefers to cook 4 or 5 nights a week because it's just a de-stress for her and it's really in her gifted zone. So allowing me to let go of cleaning my house, doing all the laundry, all of those things that I thought I should be doing as a mom because that's how I was raised, has allowed me to have so much more joy in my life. It's allowed me to raise very independent children who now have their own businesses. And it's allowed me to give income to families that do clean my house, where they enjoy it, and it provides a blessing. So it's a win-win. It's a blessing to me, it's a blessing to them, and it releases the perfection in my life. So I'm going to pop it back over to Gail, who's going to answer that same question.
Well, I kind of had the same thing with my house, Sarah. And it's so funny because my husband, Bill Roddy, will say to me, I'll ask him if he can clean something. Would you do this for me? And often it involves cleaning. And he will always say, you're going to laugh at this. Do you want it woman clean or man clean? Because we women we can get into perfectionism about our nests. Our nests have to be cleaned a certain way and look a certain way. But with him, as long as it's clean is good enough. So I'm learning from him that it's good enough to have the house where it's swept every once in a while, the countertops are cleaned off, the dishes are in the dishwasher. Once upon a time, that just simply wouldn't have been enough for me. But now I'm learning that's good enough. The house is good enough. I'm going to pop it over to Dr. Martina.
Thanks, Gail. Unfortunately, I have the same thing on my list, housekeeping. I have never, ever enjoyed housekeeping. In my mother's house, weekend cleaning would have been spring cleaning in everybody else's house. So I've always hated it. I have finally given in and gotten a housekeeper. I've also found a space of good enough in my professional life. I don't often say it, I'm actually a good surgeon, but I'm also an exceptional listener. So I have to balance those things. Certainly, when I'm healthy, I can probably do 6 major cases in a day. But that makes me very tired. I can't spend any time with my children or my grandchildren, and I really hate being in the office the other days, which I really enjoy, which is sitting down with the patients one-on-one and talking through what's really going on. It doesn't always mean that I'm going to operate on them, but it gets them to where they need to be. And so I have to decide in the surgical realm, good enough. I can get this number of cases done, and someone else that I think is pretty good can probably get the others done. But I can be absolutely available to the patients that I want to talk to. And I'm going to pop it over to Ashley.
Wow, this is such a great question. When is good enough, and how does it develop in my life? I'm in a very precarious situation right now where I'm still living with my mom and I don't have my own private space. I'm living in the living room. So my stuff is everywhere, and it grows and it grows and it creeps. And does it bother me? Oh, yes, it does. But I think that I'm in training for getting some of those rough edges of perfection off. I'm kind of smoothing out a little bit. So I think there are some days I just have to turn an eye to what's going on and focus. Just continue to remember what my values are and remember to focus and not be so uptight that things are not the way that I would want them, but instead look towards gratitude for everything that I have right here, right now, and let that move forward. Let that energy move forward rather than focus on I would call it a pigsty. Yeah, the pigsty, and not qualify it as that, because I'm so grateful to be right here, right now, and have the resources that I have access to. I'm going to pop it on over to Sweetie.
Thanks, Ashley. For me, I think it's come out a lot this year in every conversation, but for me, it's come up in time management. We're good enough is fine. It's time management. And I do, like I think so many of us, have voices in my head that shame me, that blame me, that tell me lies. And I've really had to start listening to how many times that negative self-talk is happening, or somebody else's boundary talk is happening. I have a friend who just continually loves to talk about how they make their food from scratch and how it's always fresh, and she has always the time to make these fantastic breakfast, lunches, and dinners. And I love to cook. I really do. I enjoy making food for my family. In fact, I was just thinking about during our laps about, well, I'm going to do chicken egg rolls tonight, and I'm going to really enjoy making a new different kind of cabbage slaw salad to go with it. But I have to really qualify what the time management essence is, because my friend has one responsibility in her entire day, and that is to provide breakfast, lunch, and dinner on the table for she and her husband. There are no children. There is no business. I know she has many things to do because she's a volunteer in many places, and she has very qualified things in her life that are important that she does. But compared to the schedule I have to pull as an owner of 2 businesses, a mother of 4 kids, of people who have responsibilities past just enjoying the cooking process during the day and their home care process, that's not a comparison of she to me. It's a comparison of reality of time management. I don't have time to spend 3 hours making every single recipe happen every day. And so for me, I have decided good enough was to have 20 of our favorite meals listed on the refrigerator. And when I plan for my menu planning for the week, I can grab from already tried and true programs that absolutely are easy for me to make that my family automatically likes. And then on the 5th week, sometimes there's a month with a 5th week. That week I actually try those 4 to 5 times a year that it happens, new recipes. Because I just don't have time to have a fallout on dinner. I just don't. It's not respectful to my husband and my children who like the same. They are not people who like a lot of changes to their menu. And so we take those 5th weeks of the month when we have those months of the year that have a 5th week, and we'll try out a couple of new ways to do things. But in general, our families learn the value of good enough is sticking with the same things we know are already tried and true for us. It affects everybody's life if you eat something. Boy, I did it this week, and it was that kind of deal where I kind of guilted myself into trying something somebody else said to try, and I spent an entire 24 hours being sick afterwards because the food didn't agree with me at all. And so sometimes that time management is also recognizing that where is the pressure coming from? Is the pressure coming from outside yourself to perform? Are you creating self-pressure to perform? Because sometimes recognizing that good enough is fine is the most healthy thing we can do for ourselves in living the lives we want to live. This has been Sweetie Berry with the Women of Dare Whimsy. Between Us Girls is a weekly program. On Thursday at darewhimsy.com, we each plug into, in fact, the rest of our team plugs in there too, to a blog post to talk about what we've learned on the topic of the week. This week's topic was When Good Enough is Fine. We know that between the 13 of us, some of you will find somebody who's a kindred spirit, and you can follow them home to their website or blog, or they can follow you home for tips that you may share. We want to hear from you too. We're not gurus, we're not experts, we're just experienced in this space as gifted girls, as you are experienced in your space as a gifted girl, and we'd like to hear from you. So please join us at darewhimsy.com. Again, the topic is under the tab Between Us Girls. You'll see our videos from each week after that week, as well as there's a sister post, a shared post between the Sisters of Dare Whimsy, the Women of Dare Whimsy, who talk about how that topic affects their lives, and some of the products, some of the things that they do, if that's their area of expertise, may be listed there as well for further hints and downloads. We hope you'll join us next week on Wednesday. Again, thanks for coming.